Have you ever wondered what would happen if all the Upper Moons decided to betray Muzan? Would such an act even be possible under the Tyrant Demon King's watch? How would they pull it off? Well, this idea may seem impossible at first, not until you really dig deep into the original plot and pull the strings to create a favorable scenario for the Upper Moon's betrayal to become possible. We have to remember that Muzan's control is only absolute if he's in tip-top shape, but while Muzan seems to be on the top of the food chain, weakening him is not impossible. So with that being said, here's my take on this very interesting what-if scenario. With this topic, I can only think of one way to make it possible. First of all, we should go back to the first time a demon escaped his grasp. Going back, we get a glimpse of Muzan's first ever defeat in all his life against the man named 𝗪𝘁𝗍. Muzan's demonic powers were basically useless at the time. His regenerative abilities failed him miserably, and the power he had that was destined to conquer the world was parried and countered flawlessly. No matter what he did, he was no match against 𝗪𝘁𝗍 Sugikuni, the creator of the first breathing technique. Now this quick flashback is important because it is in this fight that a very special demon that knew all his secrets escaped his grasp. This demon would later be known as Lady Tamayo. Escaping Muzan's control is not an easy feat at all. Tamayo was only able to do that because Muzan was badly weakened by 𝗪𝘁𝗍 to the point where he had no choice but to escape. I mean seriously, 𝗪𝘁𝗍 gave Muzan PTSD that all the Upper Moons know how much he feared 𝗪𝘁𝗍. Now, you would think that since 𝗪𝘁𝗍 is no longer alive, how in the world would the Upper Moons be able to weaken Muzan enough for them to escape his grasp? Well, like I said before, it will be hard, but it's not impossible. You see, the main reason why they have not tried a coup d'etat is because Muzan has complete control over them. I mean, look at what he did to Akaza when he failed to kill Tanjiro, 𝗪𝘁𝗍, and Zenitsu. With a flick of his finger, Akaza was bleeding on the floor while he told the Upper Moon 3 how much of a disappointment he was. Seriously, you would have to be brave enough or stupid enough to try and challenge Muzan, because in all honesty, no demon in their right mind would go against someone who could do that with such ease. Now here's where we start kicking things off into the next gear. At this point, I will tell you how exactly they will weaken Muzan and how the coup d'etat will commence. We see Ubuyashiki, the head of the Demon Slayer Corps, use himself to lure Muzan to his humble abode and blow himself up, along with his wife and 2 children. This trap creates the perfect opportunity for Tamayo to get closer to Muzan and sacrifice herself to do the unthinkable. You see, Tamayo did not blindly charge in there without a plan, because before she did that, Tamayo ingested and assimilated the anti-kibutsuji drug in hopes that Muzan would consume her and the drug as well. The anti-kibutsuji drug is a 4-stage drug. The first stage is the human conversion stage. This stage was specifically made to turn Muzan into a regular human. The second stage was the biological aging stage. This stage was able to age Muzan 50 years in a single minute. This stage is the most important as it jeopardizes all of Muzan's abilities drastically. The third stage after the biological aging stage is the splitting prevention stage. The effect of this stage prevented Muzan from escaping the way he did from 𝗪𝘁𝗍. Lastly, the final stage of the anti-kibutsuji drug is the cellular destruction stage, which literally destroys Muzan's cells and is meant to finish him off. This, my friends, is exactly how the Upper Moons will be able to escape from Muzan's grasp. The only argument to be made here is, in the original plot, before the drug reaches the second stage, all of the Upper Moons are already dead. We see Muzan realizing his pace was slowing down and that the Hashira's swords were starting to hurt him. Later on, it was revealed that Muzan had already aged 9,000 years since the battle began. By this point, Doma, Akaza, Kokushibo, and Kaigaku were already dead from battling the Hashiras. Now, what if the second stage was more potent? Instead of 50 years per minute, what if it was 100 years per minute? Now, this is an entirely new route, and a very interesting one as well. And if this was the case, and we do a quick math, 100 years per minute would mean that after an hour, Muzan would have already aged for 6,000 years. By that point, Muzan's control over his subordinates would start slipping, and the Upper Moons would still be alive. Once Muzan's control starts to weaken, the Upper Moons could break free from his control, much like Tamayo did. Now, we all know that while fighting, the Hashiras, Kokushibo, and Akaza started to gain clarity near the end. Kokushibo saw that the path he took was wrong, and instead of becoming the strongest, he became a monster. Meanwhile, Akaza remembers his late father, wife, and master, and while he was very nearly conquering death, the vision he had on his past made him surrender and take his own life instead. However, in this alternate timeline, these events will become a pivotal moment for both Akaza and Kokushibo in their decision to betray Muzan. On the other hand, Doma and Kaigaku never really had this moment, since Doma is a textbook narcissist and seems to adore Muzan so much. I mean, he even volunteered to gouge his eyes out when Muzan expressed his disappointment towards the Upper Moons. And then we have Kaigaku, who is just a jerk who's self-proclaimed powerful when he can't even master Thunder Breathing's first form. But since the topic is Muzan being betrayed by all the Upper Moons, let's just say Doma has had enough of living and just wants all the smoke with Muzan, while Kaigaku realizes his errors and decides to atone for his mistakes, just like Akaza and 𝗪𝗪𝗪. With that being said, let's proceed to how the coup d'etat will go down. Starting with Akaza, through sheer indomitable will, Akaza overcame death even though Tanjiro already cut off his head. During this time, Akaza's memories start flooding back. Remembering his past filled Akaza's heart with regret. For the last 200 years of his life, he took countless lives for no apparent reason under Muzan's control. After all of this, Akaza realized that Muzan took advantage of him while he was at his lowest point, and this fact angered him so much. As he regenerated his severed head, he turned to Gyomei and Tanjiro, dropped to his knees, and begged for their forgiveness. Long story short, Akaza promised to help them defeat Muzan and receive his punishment in order to atone for his sins. Tanjiro and Gyomei reluctantly accepted Akaza's offer and made their way toward Muzan. With the Upper Moon 3's help, they were able to avoid any unnecessary fights, and traveling to the Infinity Castle became much easier. On the other hand, 𝗪𝗪𝗪, before the fight started, sensing that something was off. Remember, the Upper Moons are connected to Muzan as much as Muzan is connected to them. So before the fight started, 𝗪𝗪𝗪 held back and merely parried away all of the Hashiras' attacks. During their fight, 𝗪𝗪𝗪 could feel the strings unraveling, and all of the Hashiras are alive, and 𝗪𝗪𝗪 is done contemplating after seeing his hideous form. In the end, 𝗪𝗪𝗪 extends his hand to help the Demon Slayer Corps kill the progenitor of demons. With that being said, Tanjiro, Gyomei, and Hakuji, that's Akaza, arrive at the area where Muzan is hiding. Immediately, Hakuji's anger spills out and he lunges at Muzan at breakneck speed, piercing Muzan's chest and kicking him in the head as hard as he can, sending the tyrant flying through the room. Coincidentally, Muzan landed in the room where 𝗪𝗪𝗪 and the other Hashiras were. The scene of Gyomei and 𝗪𝗪𝗪 shaking hands baffled Muzan. At that point, he knew that Akaza and 𝗪𝗪𝗪 had already betrayed him. Expressing his disappointment, Muzan raised his hands and flicked it at the two traitors. But, to his dismay, nothing happens to his targets. This is when 𝗪𝗪𝗪 confirms his theory that they are no longer under Muzan's control to be true. Muzan also realizes that this may have been the effect of Tamayo's drug and hastens his body's assimilation to nullify the second stage's effect. At this point, the entire narrative of the Infinity Castle arc will change to better suit the what-if scenario we have. Okay, so back to the topic. With the revelation, 𝗪𝗪𝗪 and the others take a fighting stance and aim their weapons at the demon tyrant. Pissed by this turn of events, Muzan lets out a blood-curdling roar that stuns everyone. The force of Muzan's roar reverberated through the Infinity Castle, sending shivers down everybody's spine. In that split second, Muzan unleashed his bladed whip like tentacles and flailed it around aimlessly, destroying everything in his surroundings. After Muzan's rampage settles down, 𝗪𝗪𝗪 steps in and transports everyone to different rooms to give Muzan the time he needs to stop the aging effect of the drug Yamato gave him. While the Hashiras and Upper Moon Demon gather their forces to take down Muzan, the tyrant's plan to nullify the drug works just in the nick of time. But it did not take long for the enemies to finally locate him. Charging in headfirst, 𝗪𝗪𝗪 and Akaza release a flurry of attacks that Muzan could barely block. On the other hand, while the battle rages on, 𝗪𝗪𝗪 realizes that Muzan no longer has any influence on the Upper Moon Demons. Seeing this as her only chance to escape, she disables his blood demon art and runs off. After the Infinity Castle collapses, Muzan becomes super enraged that his subordinates are betraying him one by one. This will mark as the alternate timeline of the Sunrise Countdown arc. While he writes with anger, Doma appears behind him and freezes his tentacles while Kaigaku swoops in and shatters them. In this moment, Kaigaku and Doma reveal their goals and join forces with the Demon Slayer Corps. With all their forces combined, you'd think that the fight would be easy. But don't forget that Muzan, in this alternate story, does not age 9,000 years yet. Instead, he'll age for only 6,000 years. This means he'll still be very spry and formidable at that age. Under the Upper Moons taking charge of the fight, casualties remained very low throughout the scrimmage. As Tanjiro swoops in and lands blow after blow with the help of 𝗪𝗪𝗪 and Akaza, the Upper Moon one recognizes his sword style to be the exact same one his late brother used. Seeing the sun breathing in action, 𝗪𝗪𝗪 felt warmth after witnessing someone use his brother's breathing technique. Muzan, on the other hand, grew very desperate to kill everyone who dared to go against him. Retreat was no longer an option for Muzan. As the fight intensifies, the Demon King gains his own momentum and slowly pushes back against his opponent. Slowly but surely, Muzan picks off all the weak members of the Demon Slayer Corps, and he consumes them one by one mid-fight, regaining some of his strength. As much as they tried to prevent this from happening, Muzan was not letting up from his barrage of attacks that seemed very impossible to dodge or block. But the real problem was just beginning, because later on, Muzan started throwing attacks that the demons were unable to regenerate from. This weird attack is a result of Muzan synthesizing the last stage of Tamayo's anti-kibutsuji drug, the cellular destruction stage. This attack pisses Doma off because, like I said, he's a textbook narcissist, and since his regeneration is hindered, his face and his whole body are slowly starting to take some serious damage, hence ruining his overall image and visuals. In retaliation, Doma throws a large-scale attack, freezing Muzan almost instantly. With this opening, Akaza, Kaigaku, Kokushibo, Tanjiro, Zenitsu, and the other Hashiras launch a large-scale counterattack, shattering Muzan's frozen body. But since not everyone has access to the transparent world, only Tanjiro, Gyomei, Kokushibo, Obanai, and Muichiro were the only ones to hit Muzan's vital spots, destroying 3 of his hearts and 2 of his brains, which meant there were still 4 hearts and 2 brains left. Before they could launch another attack, Muzan had already finished regenerating. In an instant, everyone was incapacitated by Muzan's lightning-fast attack. The only ones who had the strength to stand up and continue to fight were Kokushibo, Kaigaku, Akaza, Doma, Gyomei, and Tanjiro. As these 6 heavy hitters stood up, Muzan praised their resilience and stated that this would be the end for all of them. Meanwhile, Kokushibo grips his sword and unleashes his blood demon art for the first time in this fight. On the other hand, Akaza increases the range of his technique deployment, while Kaigaku and Doma amp up their blood demon art outputs to maximum levels. From that point on, it was a battle between monsters, with only 2 minutes left before the sun rises. The Upper Moons and Muzan go all out in hopes of eliminating the opposing side and finally claiming their victory. Not even Tanjiro or Gyomei could sneak in and join the fight, as the confrontation was too much for a mere human to intervene. Finally, as the dust settled down, the victor of the onslaught was finally revealed. Muzan had completely decimated the Upper Moons. As the Demon King stood over the exhausted and bloodied bodies of his once loyal followers, he turned his attention towards Tanjiro and the rest of the Demon Slayer Corps. Without realizing it, his bout with the Upper Moons took a more significant amount of time than Muzan realized by the time it ended. There were only 2 minutes left before the sun was about to rise. So for the last 2 minutes, Gyomei, Tanjiro, and the rest of the Hashiras held their ground to stop Muzan from escaping. Still, even though Muzan just went all out against the Upper Moons, he still had a lot left in the tank to properly dispose of the remaining Demon Slayers. After doing everything they could, sadly, Gyomei, Muichiro, Obanai, Kanroji, Genya, and Shinobu lost their lives trying to stop Muzan. With this tragic turn of events, you would think that Muzan had finally won. But nuh-uh, because he made one fatal mistake. He did not finish off all the Upper Moons after he decimated them. With the help of Tanjiro, Sanemi, and Giyu, the Upper Moons mustered all their strength to hold down Muzan. Kokushibo and Kaigaku impaled Muzan to the ground using their swords, while Doma and Akaza clung to his body as hard as they could. In the end, the Upper Moons all achieved their goals, and with their noble sacrifice, the sun burned through the Demon King's flesh, ending his tyranny once and for all. The story might proceed in a peculiar way from here on, but that's it for the what-if theory if the Upper Moons betrayed Muzan. If you want to switch things up, why don't you check out the video on your screen right now? What are you waiting for? Click it.